So welcome, Spring and Laurie. I'm so delighted that you're here for the final call in the consciousness deep dive before we begin our closing round process, at least the final open call. And there's a group of us here who are going to be watching you in the middle of our virtual fishbowl as you have a dialogue that we called a paradigm bridging conversation that emerged out of a conversation you had at the Climate Change and Consciousness Conference that I was not at, so I only have a little bit of background on that, and that only comes from Spring. But I'm just really, honored and delighted to have you do this as both modeling, what it's like to talk across some of these divides, to navigate these sticky territory. And I think there was this really important insight, that set this up, that it's not just people who see the need for systemic transformation on the one hand and the mainstream business as usual, frameworks on the other, that within the cohort that understands deeply and profoundly how much things need to change, there's still all kinds of different opportunities for bridging paradigms. And I think it's really important and useful, not only to name that, but to do that work. So thank you so much for modeling it. And with that, I will leave you to it.
Oh, wow. Laurie, where are the fish inside the bowl now?
Where should we start? Is there some food to nibble on?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, since this is the paradigm bridging conversation, this is how I think we should start, and I'd like to hear yours. So our conversation I think one of the central questions we're sharing our opinions about is there are, the people show up at the Finghorn, for example, we're all aware that there's a crisis, there's a very emergent situation going on. But I think between you and I, we probably represent some of the differences in we think how we approach this. So maybe we can each share of what our views are and start from there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think actually it's interesting because you use the word opinions, and I think I'm very careful about opinion. And if you like, there might be some opinions, there might be some beliefs, there might also be feelings and just things that are our pathways and choices, which might be.
Yes.
I think there's something about differentiating.
Yes.
Some of those things, and some of it's about what is. Oh.
Yeah, I like what you said. Pathways and the feelings. Yeah. And also, I want to say, because this is a recording and whoever is going to watch it, English is also not my first language. So my choice of word may not always be precise.
Yes.
So
I'm sorry to land you with having to speak my first language. But, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the conversation we had in Findhorn, I think it started from stuff around flying.
Right.
And there was the concrete thing was that we had this conference where 300 or so people had, many had flown, many from the other side of the world, to a conference that was about flying. And quite early in the conference, I stood up and said, are we acknowledging that the emissions from holding this conference could be enough to cause one climate death? And so there's that. I think there's something quite hard, and there are conversations that I'm having in a lot of different places. So I'm a Quaker. I'm very involved with conversations among Quakers. I'm also involved in Extinction Rebellion in the UK and conversations there. And there's a lot that's about where does our individual involvement in the system and our personal choices, how do we relate those to our consciousness of what's happening and how urgently it needs to change, maybe, or maybe we don't think it needs to change. And also, how does it where does it lead us in our personal choices?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe for the benefit of audience, can you be a little more, I mean, we had this conversation between us, but can you be a little more explicit so other people know more concrete, like what's your feeling around flying and yeah.
Okay, so so part of where I come from, I'm originally a scientist. I did a physics degree. I did a PhD in energy studies 35 years ago. I've been an IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change lead author for several reports. I did some of the original work on the impact of flying on contribution of flying to climate change. And I made a final decision that for me, it doesn't feel right to fly about 18 years ago, 2002. And I guess quite a lot of my personal choices are about trying to minimize my involvement in the system of what I feel is violence. And I guess there's something about how do I connect with the system, with other people. That can be quite an isolating choice.
Yeah.
And mostly I would say I work on it not being judgment. But I definitely have feelings, I guess, and they're feelings of sadness. And also sometimes feeling of, I think the closest I would put it is disgust around when I'm around activities that feel to me like they're part of the violence. Yeah.
So there might, for example, like the gathering we had at Finghorn is one of those activities that might evoke disgust and sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
A real discomfort with being in this, yeah, it feels like a deep disconnect for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the truths that we're trying to engage with.
Great.
And by the way, I mean, I have similar conversations, or I have similar feelings in conversations around meat is quite a big one.
Yeah, meat. Eating meat. Yes. Yeah.
Which was maybe the earliest choice I made in my life was to be vegan.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was my kind of strongest choice in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laurie, I really like, so I got to know you a little bit through the conference, and I really respect the kind of personal choice you made for yourself. And I saw how you have the kind of sacrifice and effort you make to stick with the discipline you set up for yourself. I just want to let you know I really respect that. I think so. I will start share some of my where I'm coming from and my reality. So also for the benefit of audience, a little bit about my background. I was born in China. I came to the United States as a PhD student at age 22. So before that, 22 years old, coming to the United States is my first taste of industrialized civilization, because my time in China was before the consumerist age. So, and I actually also had a degree in science, molecular biology and statistics. However, majority of my career, I was, for me, the passion of my career is Chinese medicine, Taoism, and the Eastern Asian cosmology and spirituality. and I'm interested in how that can be applied to the transformation of the world. So I just want to maybe go back to that experience at the Finghorn when Laurie and I made a friend during that week, and when Laurie told me how he's feeling disgusted by, or there's one layer of disgust feeling around the activity we're sharing, I was pretty shocked and also feeling sad, because for me the lens at which I look at climate change, even though I was my professional career involved a lot of natural science, that was hardly my primary lens to look at the crisis we're facing right now. For me, the crisis we're facing today is the deep isolation in people's heart and soul with each other. And personally, that like the week I spent I did fly from Seattle to Finghorn, and personally, that week to me was one of the most important life events in my life, because in that week, the word humanity was no longer an abstract term. It became filled with 350 faces from 42 different ethnic backgrounds. So I think, so for me, I feel like because also in my life, I have transitioned from a pre-industrial, kind of material scientific centric worldview into a scientific worldview. For me, I feel like this habit of our mind that's forged through the Western civilization is to reduce every pattern into a quantitative number. Is actually lies the heart of the transformation where we're going through right now. Is how do we shift, not out of, but in addition to that hard quantitative worldview, into also broaden into including human connection that right now we don't know how to quantify, we don't know how to put into equations, we cannot calculate its benefit. It's only something we can experience and feel and resonate in the world. So how do we put our center of gravity of attention into the heart-based worldview? So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that for me happened at the conference, so first of all, on the flying thing, it felt to me like, so there were a number of people from indigenous communities whom I would never have met in other circumstances. I think part of it for me was it did feel like there was also quite a lot of people who had casually come to this conference. So I think that was maybe a little bit of it was, there's a thing about how conscious we are that we're making a really big choice to do this. And it felt to me, and it's like Uncle Agankak, is that the right? I mean, I think that he talked about having been appointed by his village as a runner to go and tell people that the great ice is melting. And I think there's something about that kind of role that, you know, that is clearly, we need people doing that kind of thing. And that I can really, you know, there are reasons why it might be really important for people to do things. But I think there's something about the scale and the casualness and the sort of normalness of it. So for me, I have, and I've said this to you, I've flown a lot in my life up to 18 years ago. One of the things about being an IPCC lead author is you go to a lot of international meetings. You know, I was involved in international policy work. One of the things that really came, one of the parts of my personal choice was that I did not feel that I was doing any better by being part of this international community than I could by devoting myself to my local or to the community that I can access without flying.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I live in Oxford, which is a very cosmopolitan city, and a lot of people come to me, so it's very easy
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways to be connected and to feel connected to humanity.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, I think there was another piece, but I'll...
Yeah, no, totally. I get it. I think you know, both you and I can have this heartfelt friendship, because I think we do resonate on that. I feel being seen by you, and I respect your choice. I don't, even though you said you'd express disgust in that moment, I don't feel like it's in direct or I didn't take it personally, because we have this great connection between us. And I do feel that where the question we're talking about here is, both of us had in our life made very great effort in making choice and conducting ourselves according to what we believe. But the question is, we inevitably bump into other people whose behavior or the way they show up is directly clash with what we feel we are standing for, and then what do we do? And the thing I actually respect about you is you always talk about how your own feeling, you know, you said you feel disgust. There's nothing I can argue about. If you feel disgust, that's your human experience. The thing that I felt very great saddened and also angered actually is some other activists that I run into, that they did not take on that as their feeling, but they right out judge other people who are not doing what they think is right. And for me, I think I think that's like a pollution to the inner climate of heart, that they are actively spewing out carbon dioxide into this climate by judging other people's behavior according to the principle they want to adopt for themselves.
Yes, I think that's completely true for me too, and I feel I guess so. I work a lot with I work with groups, I work with different networks on sustainable living. I find that mostly in these networks, people see what they are doing as trying to bring about change in other people. There's a line that I love very much from Amos Oz, he died, the Israeli author. He's got a little book called How to Cure a Fanatic, and he says the essence of fanaticism is the desire to force other people to change.
Say it again. Say it again.
The essence of fanaticism is the desire to force other people to change. He's writing in the Israel-Palestine context.
Yes.
But, you know, which he's basically advocating, how can we just be good neighbors to each other? And I feel, you know, it's very hard, because if you're working in this field, people expect you to be campaigning and to have opinions about what other people should do. And I actually don't really have, I don't really, in some ways, there's a bit of me that really just likes being special and not doing what everyone else does.
That's what I like about you. You're so honest and a human.
We are, yes.
I you know, a lot of people on this call shared how their interest, you know, their passion and interest is about consciousness, and I feel that what we talk about is the key here, is that the self, our self, is the most powerful vehicle of consciousness. If we actually master the essence of consciousness, then probably all we need to do is to change ourselves, and that change would ripple out. But the thing is, we're not like perfect, and we're human too. So inevitably, like I run into similar thing is when I get triggered, the feelings arise, pain and the disgust and anger arise when I run into people. Well, not so much when people are different than me, but when, like for example, several days ago, I was in a conversation with a colleague, and she told me her husband is a diehard environmentalist, and right now I don't own an electric car. I have a very old internal combustion engine car that right now I don't have the funds to replace. And she said if her husband know about the fact that I'm driving a internal, not an electric car, he would totally discount my work. So that kind of judgment, it does trigger me. I feel very pained by that. Like, how can he use his judgment laid on me, and he has no idea what kind of effort, sacrifice I made in my life to get to where I am. And likewise, I can make up all kinds of principle to judge him if I want. What if I say I believe that people should not have children to be an activist? I mean, this is just like, it's very, very reductionist,
and it's another one of the hot conversations that is very much around this.
Yeah. But I feel like we're trying to, by reducing the pattern into a criteria to measure, we're kind of like trying. This is what got us into this trouble, is the reductionist mindset. And I'm not saying reductionist is all bad. We need that reductionist tool to make sense of the world. But the key is get down to is, like I use a reductionist tool to make sense my world, to regulate, manage how I engage. But do I like transfer my criteria and principle to other people? But that's the thing I really would like to call awareness of people, is how do we apply these principles coming out of a reductionist methodology onto ourselves or others.
Yes. Can I? One of the things that I'm really excited about in our conversation, and which I guess I still really want to learn more from you around, is okay. Another thing about me is I'm Jewish, and so if you like, the esoteric tradition in Judaism is Kabbalah. And I think there are some interesting parallels in Kabbalah and Taoism.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by that exploration. And I guess I think one of the themes that comes in both is the kind of multidimensionality of what matters. These different principles. In Kabbalah, it's divine emanations. Which are in balance and in flow and in imbalance, and all of those dynamics. And in some ways, I guess for me, partly they represent different aspects of consciousness. And I guess for me, I feel like there's some of this is about how do we bring together different aspects of consciousness, and it's not about saying this one's right and that one's wrong. So quantitative quantification is a particular piece of consciousness, if you like.
Yes.
A particular way of being conscious.
Yes.
And then the heart and the emotions, whatever, it's another way, and sensing through the body, sensing through recognizing our intuition through bodily sensations, that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's another way of consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
And I think in a way, I guess I'm aware that I am well developed in some areas of consciousness and very poorly developed in others. One thing I learned recently is that I'm completely undeveloped in is I learned a word for it, of being aphantasmic. that I have no capacity to form a mental image.
Oh, what's the word?
Aphantasmic. So if I close my eyes, I can't see anything. I can't conjure up
Okay.
an image. And I went through years of participating in guided visualizations and and just falling asleep because I couldn't see anything. And then I learned recently, people doing research in this, that actually it's a real phenomenon, that some
Wow.
people
Okay.
don't have that mechanism in the brain.
Yeah.
So learning and recognizing how much that shaped my way of engaging with the world is really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Often it's interesting. But there's something about for me, about being with other people,
Mm-hmm.
of kind of acknowledging, you have such profoundly deep, I suppose, well-developed awareness in places where I don't. And I just respect that totally and want to learn from it.
Wow.
And I think but one of the things I heard a lot in the Fintorn conference, and which I was uncomfortable with, was people saying there were quite a few. It felt to me like a lot of the keynotes were people saying, "This is the way we should see things, and those people are wrong."
Right. Yeah.
And that for me is
Yes.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I really feel like it's both and.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me that's true with the data thing, is that
yeah.
I do count my footprint.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But I also think it's really unhealthy to get over obsessed with it, and I think maybe I'm a bit unhealthily over obsessed with it. But I also discourage, when I talk to other people, I discourage them from getting focused on the bottom line, because I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's helpful to compare ourselves.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really important that I put it alongside. So for me, a lot of the things about aeroplanes is, it just feels to me like, why would I want to get in a metal tube that's churning out these gases, and that is this huge part of this huge industrial system? It just feels so much part of the the paradigm that needs to transform.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. Well, first of all, thanks for acknowledging what you see in me, and I think me coming to Western world to learn to be get my doctorate degree is also catching up my quantitative skill that I not something that I'm inherently drawn to. About the transformation, maybe the last thing you said, I feel one kind of meta assumption we have is that transformation is about correcting, like, oh, this is not good, so let's correct that to something we know is good. But so what I see is that if we see the world as an organism, with a living being, then transformation is not about correcting, but about growth through. It's about we need to grow out of it. So this industrialized system, it's not like it's wrong. But it's maturing. It's trying to be it needs a certain level of maturation so that it can grow out of it. So another level of consciousness can be developed that can contain this. Right now, the industrialization is going out of hand. It's like a teenager with hormones just run amok. But it doesn't mean we have to put the teenager back into a toddler. It means we need to help the teenager to become a mature goes into its maturity. And I actually for me I've actually started to consciously practicing how to be with people who are just outright different than me. By marriage, I was connected with very conservative people in the Midwest of the United States, and I'm practicing if I actually just shut off my mental narrative of the worldview. I mean, of course, we disagree on many things, but if I can just put that aside and just enter their world and experience who they are and experience their humanity. It's actually quite enjoyable.
Yes.
Much more enjoyable than if I stick with that mental narrative.
Yes.
And I think probably because of my background, I have an inherent faith that this human connection is the healing agent for our world. I think, all the quantitatives, the methodology are important, but it's like, if someone is gravely injured, you definitely want to like treat its wound and put a bandage on and make sure its antibiotic is applied. But that's not enough. That's not healing. We have to get the person's vitality to cultivate this person's vitality and has its immune system to kick in. So I think like the quantitative aspect and the heart aspect, they need to work together.
I think that, I mean, I think there are some different pieces in this. I guess if I think about, actually, there's too many things in what you just said that I kind of would like to respond to, but
okay.
One little piece is that I'm one of the ways that I've most absorbed other people's worldviews is by falling in love with them, I guess. And it's kind of, and I suppose, I mean, I don't actually know very many people or I'm not sure if I know anyone who is quite like me. That may be because I haven't listened well enough, but I guess I've only been in relationships with people who are quite different one way or another. And I guess, my last partner drove and flew and ate meat. And so there was quite a lot of actually working with, I feel like in many ways I need to be connected to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, there's another piece. This is something that was quoted by another Quaker giving a talk, but it was about prophets, and it's a line from I think he was a Jesuit or something, but anyway, that the prophet needs to love the age that she lives in. So if you want to be part of the transformation,
right,
you need to actually love the age.
Yes.
And there's a big piece of that for me, but I think also there's also, I guess my life, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I guess 20 years ago, I think I still had a hope that maybe there was consciousness work that could lead to a deliberate evolution, that could lead to an awakening of society, that it would have a non-violent transition. And I think that's something that's becoming increasingly voiced by people at the moment, is that feels increasingly unlikely, that it increasingly feels that the system is so unable to change fast enough, deeply enough, that it feels quite likely that some horrible things are already happening. But that it's going to get a lot. But it feels hard to see how it won't get a lot worse. How there won't be a lot of pain.
Right.
In the transition, and that may be, in the end, for me, my life has had two threads really. One is about sustainability, if you like. And that was, that for me started with, in the 1970s around energy and environmental destruction and the rainforest and all that other stuff. And then the other is about consciousness and awakening. And I suppose I see the consciousness and the awakening as it is about, a lot of it is about bringing in these different parts. I've said this already, but I guess so it's not a prioritizing of head over heart or heart over head, or it's how do we expand our repertoire of consciousness. And some of that is inner and some of that is outer.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I saw a message from Ben, said
Is
the
it time to
time
stop?
check. Is that, are we and no pressure to wrap up if you need to continue. So I feel we're winding down. I only have one last comment to share, but I feel pretty complete otherwise. So I would just share that about this. You know, I also saw another comment from Michael Cillian about things get a lot worse. You know, for me, because the environment, the way that I was brought up, and for me, the worst time in my life was when I experienced the pristine environment of the China was just in a blink of eyes being destroyed by the marching into the industrialization time. And it's not just the environment; it's just not the river and the forest and the you know, ocean. It's human heart. It's so brittle that it just instantly from this pristine naivety almost like to the erosion of greed comes in so fast. And I actually feel right now, to me, right now we are already, the civilization is already in a dead place. What we're, to me, that's how I feel is right now we're experiencing is just the decomposition of a dead body. We're not living. We are not living. And I, you know, of course, I'm thinking of, I totally agree. Things are going to get worse, but that's what happens to dead body, is dead body decompose, so that a new life can come through to use up. So the new consciousness have to like be able to digest the decomposed dead body in order to come through. I feel like in my life I've died so many times just watching and feeling into what our culture used to have and just being destroyed again and again. So I think, I don't know, I think for a lot of, this might be my projection, I'm not sure, but I don't know if people who are born and grow up in industrial time will feel the same way. But for me, I think transitioning into industrialization time is already the death. And what else more can be fearful? I mean,
yeah. No, I share that. I mean, I guess, yeah. At one level, you know, I guess my highest hope is that there is something of humanity, of humans, that continues, that can flourish, you know, that can blossom, can maybe awaken to a kind of sense of collective consciousness, and both the capacity to continue awakening and also to nurture everything around us. To nurture the planet that we're part of. I guess that's kind of mixed with, because I guess my early experience is, you know, because I was a child in the 60s, which was still, I guess, a post-Second World War experience in Britain and in a Jewish family, so kind of post-Holocaust, and this sense of, you know, that it can so easily happen again. That so there was a feeling that we're, you know, on the edge of maybe nuclear war, that we as Jews aren't safe, that there's that kind of, you know, that destruction is so present. And I feel in a way there's Western society has kind of hidden from that sense of its own mortality. And consumerism may be part of that.
I think accepting our death is a big part of it. it's a big part of the transformation. Only when we accept the dying process can we actually start to open ourselves to the new life that wants to live. I truly not just believe, I can feel that there's new life that wants to come through Earth. But it won't come through if we don't drop into this dying process. So
do you think we should stop?
I'm fine. I'm complete. This is really wonderful, Laurie.
Yes. I have actually. I want to add one. There's one little other bit that came that was really important for me in Findhorn, and I'm not sure it wasn't part of our conversation so much, but it was a big part of the dynamic in Findhorn.
Yeah.
And it relates to this othering and how much we, the tendency to see things from our own perspective. So there were people in the conference, those who there will be very familiar with what happened, I think, but there were people from Australia and New Zealand, Indigenous people from Australia and New Zealand in the conference. And some of them were in my home group in the conference. And there was a conflict I would say it was a distress.
Yes. Yeah.
That emerged in the conference, and it emerged in my home group. And somebody walked out of the home group. And it was quite difficult dynamics that was to do with some of the Indigenous people feeling that the conference was being organized on colonial lines. And that insufficient attention had been given to actually empowering, enabling, respecting the different places, the different realities. And those are communities, those Indigenous communities are communities that have suffered genocide essentially at British hands, and this was a conference in Britain.
Right, yeah.
So I think there's something about how we work with those wounds on many levels.
Yes.
And I had one of the transformational conversations I had in the conference, as well as the one with you, was with the facilitator of my home group, who is German. And we had this amazing conversation from the perspective of her as a member of a perpetrator community that has done a lot of work with its own shame.
Right.
And me as a member of a victim and perpetrator community, which has failed to work with its own shame.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really about kind of knowing our place in that landscape of
totally. I'm also a victim perpetrator group too, as Chinese, but that I think that opened up a whole nother territory.
I
know. Second episode. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really also very much in my heart too. Shall we open up to the rest?
We had better, yes, sorry.
Let's see what other fish
really
think.
Lovely talking to you. Really lovely, again, having these conversations.
Yes.
So welcome everybody else.
Ben, you have to unmute yourself, so I can't hear you.
Thank you both so much for that. Wow, what a wonderful thing to witness.